So I'm just going to give a brief introduction, I guess. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, all of us who could join today. I'm excited to introduce our speaker, which is Dr. Ali Najam. And, this is an easy introduction to make because he's one of our own. So for those who don't know, he graduated from Shifa and sat through the same classes many of us are in now and have gone through. And he is currently a first-year resident in internal medicine at Reading Hospital in Pennsylvania. So he's been through the whole ERAS process and the match process as well recently and successfully, which is why we wanted him here. So today's session is going to be all about ERAS, what the application actually asks for, how to approach each section, and what to keep in mind as you fill it out. So, he's been on the other side of it, and he's here to walk us through it. And, I suppose, with that, over to you, sir.
Thank you for the very kind introduction. Very nice to see a lot of familiar names. So I think the purpose of today's session should be to get because the ERAS application can be a very overwhelming process in general. I think what's important to realize is what's the underlying principle of navigating through the application. I've been through the application process twice, and I don't shy away from saying this because the first time I didn't actually match, and then the second time I did. And I think going through it, and I actually went through the match cycle 3 times because while I was applying the second time, my wife was applying with me, and I kind of went through her application as well. So and what I've kind of learned from that process, and I've been reviewing applications since while applying, and then throughout the first year of residency as well, and I've been able to help a few applicants successfully match. So I can't pretend to know all there is to an ERAS application, but I have some personal kind of takeaways and opinions about the match process, which I think may be of use to some of you. With that, let me kind of share my screen. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen? All right. So bilkul, like from the basic objective. So like today, I just want to focus on what is the underlying principles of ERAS, which is basically your residency application. A brief overview of what, why, when, and how, like what's the application is, what you have to do without it becoming very overwhelming. Personal key takeaways and my overall approach, and then what not to do, in my opinion. So there's a lot of like my personal learnings in this. So you can, again, you'll talk to a lot of people and they'll give you different advices. I think this works well for me. So what's the principle? So supplement your IV. The IV is not a peripheral IV as I'm talking about. IV is short for interview. So I think the way you should look at your ERAS application is that all it is going to be fodder for your interview. Your interview, depending on where and who you interview with, will be a very key part of whether you match or not. More and more, it's becoming important. And essentially, if I could put it in one line, I think the most important thing that they look for in an applicant is how are they? And that's so hard to judge, right? It's so hard to make a determination if this particular person is someone you would want to work with for 3 years or a year or whatever, the 4 years, whatever specialty you're applying to. And that's essentially what they're looking for. So the interview is really where they kind of make that determination. And the beginning of that kind of starts with your ERAS application, which is the written ERAS application. That is not the only part of it. You'll be applying to different programs, and that entire process is also called the application. But here's what I mean when I talk about the written application. Some confusing terms, what is ERAS, what is NRMP. So ERAS is the electronic residency application. NRMP is the national registration. So these basically are distinct entities. ERAS is the portal through which you apply. NRMP is the portal through which you match. So what's the difference? ERAS is just kind of like, it's just to expedite the application process, like a centralized place where all the applications are placed and programs and applicants can communicate in between. What is the NRMP? The NRMP, so basically the match process itself is an algorithm. So you will rank programs as how you, so say you interview at 5 programs, and you will rank them from top to bottom, uh, whichever they are. And then programs will also rank their applicants. And the purpose, and I think, I'm pretty sure, like this one, like a Nobel Prize, like this algorithm of connecting people uh, in a fair and equitable manner, is because then you end up where you want to be. And you also kind of maintain meritocracy. And that's, NRMP, the only time you will check NRMP is in the beginning and the end of the match. ERAS is where you will be loading on your experiences, everything that you want the programs to know. And then program directors and faculty can go through your application through it, apply filters and whatnot. Timeline. So generally every year it's going to be around the summer, May, June. That's where you kind of start. The ERA season begins. You can buy what they call a token, which is basically kind of your entry pass into the match process. And September is when usually the match opens. So that's usually when you have to submit your application. And then March is usually when you get match results. And there is soap week, which is all the unfilled spots are filled in 1 week. And then the cycle continues. And this is how it's been for a very long time. Components of the ERAS application. So lots of words here, but I'll just briefly go through them. This is essentially a personal statement, which is a standard of any American application. If you've applied in high school, you would know. You write out what your goals, aspirations, and why you want to be in a specialty. A lot of people will say a lot of different things about it. Does it make or break your application? I don't think so. Is it important? I think to a fair degree. What purpose does it serve? Same thing. It's only there to supplement and give substance to your interview and give you more things to talk about during interview. Otherwise, I don't think if anybody reads your personal statement, they're going to hire you or be very interested in you as a candidate just on the basis of your personal statement. I don't think that happens. Letters of recommendations, fairly important. These are what the name implies. You can get them only from your home country. You can get them only from US rotations. You can get a combination of them. Some programs will require you to have an LOR from your internal medicine clerkship or residency at the medical school that you practice. So there are lots of nuance to it, but generally you need letters of recommendation. MSPE is just something like you go to Shifa's office, admin office, and they upload for you. So it will be like a sum total of how your academic performance has been, and et cetera, et cetera. It's a very standardized template. And transcripts are your final scores whenever you give your exam, step 1 and step 2, which you send through the uh, uh, through ERAS. And you actually have to pay a bit for all of these. There's the photograph, the very common, very famous gray background photograph. So you get that photograph taken. I got mine taken at F6 for like now, I think it's like what, 1,000 rupees. Uh, you program selection, medical school transcript. Yep, that's about it. And experiences we'll talk a bit more, but nothing out of the ordinary. Very standard kind of template of an application. I did not actually know that they are recently changing letters of applicable, LORs and their templates. But for those of you who are interested in emergency medicine, they have their own template. I M programs also have something called I.M. SEL. So there are sometimes structured formats, but I've heard that they're adding more and more specialization to them. So if you're considering applying surgery or something pathology, then there may be a standardized letter of recommendation that you would have to have filled while you apply to them. So person statement, as I said, I don't think this is something that will make or break it, but I think it's very important. The act of writing a person statement is very important because, again, that will be stuff that you will think about and talk about during your interview, and what your kind of personality is. And it's just a very good form of reflection to understand why you're in medicine, what you like about medicine, what brought you to medicine in the first place, where you want to be when you go to medicine. So it's like a journaling kind of act, and in that regard, it's very, very important. um, and you do want to have it in a very in a particular pattern. You don't want it to be very philosophical or very long, but I also don't think you need to stress too much about it. And the way I recommend going about personal statement is just kind of writing and rewriting it and sending it to a couple of people in the months leading up to the match. So transcripts, you will have to pay a few dollars. It's just money. They just make money off of you from this, but you pay for the exams, you get transcripts, and then you have to pay to submit these transcripts as again. But nothing else to it. This is basically just you will get. The one thing about them is that you have to be mindful of time. So if you're giving your step 2 very, very close to the September deadline, or to the point where applications open, an average step exam will take 2 to 3 weeks at least to result. So you want to be mindful of that, because they do need your official transcript. Some people would apply or give their step 2 a bit late in the season, like say, for example, October and November, get their results in January, in which case they will email programs the transcripts of the exam they just gave. Um, right. So ERAS experiences. So this is what will be the most tricky part for most of you. Right now, the template is there are 10 total experiences, and then 3 of them you have to, there's a separate box where you have to fill out why is this the most meaningful experience for you. 10 experiences can be anything, but it is a pre-selected drop-down category, so you have to choose from a few. I believe you can do other and add anything there. But the important thing is that it will be a heading, it will be a type of an experience, and then you write about what you did in that experience. And that will be for 10 of them, but for only 3 of them, you'll get to write why these were the 3 most important ones. So they will make you choose what the most important ones were. And again, a lot of people will butcher this because they will just copy paste AI stuff, um, which is and I think now we're in a counter culture where everybody was like, oh, AI is so good, AI is so good, and now it's like everybody's kind of caught on. There are certain AI phrases, words, and AI sometimes has the tendency to say a lot without saying anything. So just words, and like important sounding words, but no clear message. So, and people have now caught on to that. So and then what happens is that people fill all this text of their applications with this. They go into interview season with this. And interview, they just kind of put out these words again, which is just reading off what they've written there. And then that's a recipe for disaster, because not one word that you have written is like an original thought. But it's there, and you're also kind of rushed, and you're kind of usually juggling so many things. You're trying to do research, writing an application, doing personal statements, doing observerships, or doing XYZ, whatever. Um, and it just seems like, okay, that's fine, who read it? Um, and it's true, not a lot of people will very deeply go into your experience, but the most meaningful one and your general tone of your experiences, people, because program directors go through so many of them, and they have ways of putting AI filters onto it. So there's a very good chance that your program application may get filtered out. Um, and essentially, it just comes down to kind of writing original thoughts, writing original things, and maintaining your original expression. Nothing wrong with grammar checks, and nothing wrong with AI per se, but I think don't overdo it. Is something that I've seen in interview applicants do wrong. Um, Program signals. This is the new thing. When I was applying, this was just coming up. Now it's pretty established. Um, you will have signals for whenever you apply. The initial philosophy used to be, especially for IMGs, they would spend like a lot of money applying on as many programs as they can, and then they would email everybody like, "I love your program. It's the best program. It's the only program I want to match at." And then they would send that same email to every other program. And this was, everybody knew that this was happening. So what they did was, both, which will help IMGs in the shorter term, but maybe hurt them in the longer term. But they've introduced signals. So that means that you have to commit. If you like a program, if you truly like a program, you have limited signals which you can use on them. And some specialties, like mine, internal medicine, will have tiered specialties. So there's a gold signal and there's a silver signal. So last year, the year I applied, 8,000, almost 10,000 applicants applied to my program. And so you have like 10,000 applications. How do you go through them? So they, one of the first things they look for is like, oh, if they're genuinely interested in the program, they would have likely spent a signal on it. So then they kind of the program director can put on a filter, okay, who cold signaled me, and that kind of is their first filter. And 4,000 people are the ones who go. They are seriously interested in this, and then that's how the process begins. Silver signal you can also do, but then you can also say, okay, so like I'm your second choice, so the program knows like where you are. So you really you have to put your money down and say like, okay, this is what I am. So and there's no duplicity. Which is good because you will save money and you don't have to apply to too many programs. That's not the philosophy. I think that's prevalent. It is bad because then it will make a very different kind of, in IMGs, very qualified IMGs may not make it into bigger, more academic, more stronger programs because they're signaling, because there's it's too high risk to signal them, and they would kind of apply safety in a few programs. So perhaps we will lose that dream, but overall it works well. Geographical preferences. So in your application, you can also set the area of the United States you want to be in. There are Northeast, there is South, there is West Coast, there is Mid-Atlantic. So whichever part of America you have a preference for. Typically, IMGs will end up on the Northeast coast, but a lot of South as well. You choose from the first thing is usually like if there is family, if there is somebody you have nearby. If it's not, then some people, for them it's like, oh, this is there someplace where there are a lot of families. So that can be a decisive factor. Some people just may approach it from purely objective point, like they're like, oh, in the South, in Alabama, not a lot of people with signal would have this place as a geographical preference because it's generally a less desirable place to be in. For not any particular reason. So kind of just, it's just strategic geographical preference for me. This is also a very soft filter. I don't think program directors apply this in order to choose their applicants, but it's something to, because it's something that comes up, and you can actually write out why you prefer this place. So you can maybe add a twist of like an interesting twist to your application by mentioning something, like saying, oh, for example, this area has like these national parks, which is when my lifelong dream to camp in, or something like that. Some people do that, but I don't think it's a very make or break category. Costs, so it's very variable, but generally, just to give you a sense, each application costs like $11 for the first 30 programs, and then 30 programs afterwards it's 30. So $30. And just to give you a frame of reference, people on average would apply 150 to 200 applicable programs. So that's a lot of money, and they would be spending a good amount to do that. Now, because you have a very limited amount of signals, I think not applying to a program but not signaling it seems kind of futile to me. But people still kind of apply a lot. But I'm not of that philosophy. You will have some mandatory fees, so your transcript will cost you, your token will cost you, Your exams will cost you, so traveling will cost you. So these things add up. So that's just something to bear in mind. And if you're early in your medical school, so if you, most of you will be asking your parents, so you can let them know, okay, this is it. If you could put some money away, I want to seriously do this, and that the earlier the better, because this is a costly venture. Um, so what's my overall approach? I was thinking of going through the ERAS application, but any of you can reach out to me, and it's actually not that hard. You can just have to just kind of click and type through stuff. I think what's harder is kind of having a bigger picture of what the ERAS application is and what to do when you're doing it, and not get caught up in the details, which is what a lot of applicants do. I think and this is my general advice for the application, is that take stock of your resources. Your application is as strong as you are focused on a particular goal and program and story, and that image you want to create of yourself. uh, by take stock of your resources, I mean is you should now start reaching out, make an Excel sheet of all the people you know, all the people who are in America, um, and all the seniors who are in America, and all the cousins and the cousins of cousins and the neighbors and the old neighbors and the people you've known and the people in school, and just kind of go through all these possibilities of people who are right now settled in America, of potentially who you can reach out to. Ask your parents' class fellows, ask your khala, pupo, chacha, all these, because at the end of the day, this is as sad as it sounds, who you know matters a lot, and then how you present yourself is the other thing that matters a lot. So use that. If you have parents who are physicians, do that. If you have cousins who are there, use that, um, to your advantage. And so you need to take stock of your resources, and I think social capital is one of the strongest things you will have. And as as meek as that sounds and as pathetic as that sounds, it's very important. And I think the sooner you kind of come terms to it, the better you are off. Um, then know your goals and aspirations. This is a bigger question for you. So all of you who are applying or aspiring towards this, ask yourself, like, what's your long-term goal? Do you want to go and stay in the US? Do you, or are you in like a time strain and you have to kind of go stay there for a while and then come back, or are you going to go train and immediately come back? Like, what is your like long-term goal and aspirations? Because depending on that, you will have some room application strategy. Right. Let me just check if there's somebody. Okay. So depending on that, you will have a lot of room in your strategy. If you are someone who just has most of his family settled in the US, or is planning and is planning to go there, I would apply a different strategy to it. Then my strategy would be, get in. Doesn't matter how. You can pivot later. And then every applicant will have a different kind of thing. So but you have to know what you want, and then that way you can talk to your mentors and get a personalized strategy to you. But a bigger sense, not exactly if what uh, I wouldn't say that you can have to tell me in fourth year, oh, that I want to do surgery or versus medicine or what, but some general long-term goals of what you think, because this is like the beginning of the adult part of your lives. Um, Balance between all parts of the application. This is very important. So a lot of people are so preoccupied with the scores that they don't think about the application. Some people get very preoccupied about the application but don't think that much about the scores. Um, your application is the sum of its parts. You cannot A good score cannot outshine a bad, poorly written application. That will catch up. There are some programs, and for sure, there are some programs which will just see your score and be like, Ajo. But most of the time, you will need to have some sense of balance between all of them. And I think you should use that. I know applicants who have scored very poorly, who even have attempts, but they have matched. And I know applicants who have amazing scores and who have not matched. And really, the difference is between how you present yourself in the interview and how your application is done. And so you should, study for your exams, but also write your application well and also work on your interview skills. These are very important things. Um, have a mentorship team. By that I mean, as you're in fourth year, third year, have a couple of people like who you will reach out to, and they should ideally be different people in different kind of levels of work. They can be a resident, a fellow, an attending, a department chair, however it is, but you will have to make a relationship with it and with incentive. And the incentive is that you kind of have to, you can't just show up to them on a Thursday afternoon while they're working hunched over a laptop and be like, sir, मैंने मेरे का match करना है. That's not how it works. You have to kind of establish a rapport, and kind of show your incentive, which is, so for most of you, this will be clinical rotations. If you're on clinical rotations in a specialty or with someone who you think, and they don't have to be like US trained or US anything, that doesn't matter. If there's someone who you respect, who you think will give you good advice, who are good clinicians, who you think will be good for your career mentorship, just go and talk to them. And before that, like before you talk to them formally, try clinical rotations. Just kind of, you as medical students, show up early, at the end of the day or during the day, whatever cases you see, you can always opt and say, I will read about this and I will present this, and then come the next day and do. And then that's fine. Nobody expects you to do like stitches or do like insane diagnosis. Just kind of show incentive and do 1 week of that, at least 5 days of that, and then be like, sir or ma'am or doctor, I think I want to do this, and I think I really appreciate how you work clinically. Could you be my mentor as I kind of navigate through my life? You can say Urdu mein or whatever, just bhi hai, but this is how you make a professional relationship. And I want you to guys to have your mentorship team, and these are people you will be reaching out again and again for any help, any confusion. And once you have this relationship, it will help you in so many ways. If you work with a surgical attending, if you're interested in surgeons, so they will, they also went to medical school, they also went through residency, they also have friends, so their resources become your resources. And it's a very sacred and it's a very privileged relationship of the teacher and the student. And for the teacher, it's very, very, they enjoy it a lot, because you get to see people and students grow, from naive to kind of becoming smart, and it's a very rewarding process. So and this is like very standardized stuff, and you can always ask feedback from these people. So these will be kind of your team. So if I have, like, for me, there was like a couple of people I always reach out about anything, um, personal statements, application strategy, what to do next. So these are like my people I would go to, and they were like an attending, and there were some friends, and there were some fellows and residents I worked with during medical school, and then researchers and whatnot. So I think but just putting it and labeling it as a mentorship team and approaching it this way, especially as you're in the outset of your clinical rotations, I think it could be very, very helpful to have that. Avoid description, tell stories. And this is something that's, again, we get a lot whenever we are writing, especially for those who don't write frequently, or who are not into like literature or reading. And so they just describe a lot of what they're seeing or feeling or want to do, which is not the best. Like, we as humans are wired to listen to stories. So try and tell stories in your applications, especially if you're talking about experiences. Talk specifically about patients that you saw, specific things about that patient that struck with you. And because anybody can write generic stuff, right? But what your unique experiences are and how that patient felt. when you palpated them, or how the goals of care conversation was with them, or how you felt when the first time you saw a pediatric patient receive CPR. These are all things that you will see as a medical student, as a house officer. And depending on how enthusiastic you are, you'll see lots of stuff. It's really, for medical students, are completely self-driven. So, but in your application, don't, in any part, personal statement, if you're writing the ERAS application, the most meaningful bit, don't be like, oh, it makes me feel this and that and this. Write very specifically about what you think and what you thought and what the context was. Um, and that is just much more receptive to read in any sense. Uh, and this, by the way, also works for your clinical rotations. Like when you're in clinical rotations and you're presenting a patient, don't just kind of read out the chart. Um, Go see the patient, put everything together, but tell a story. And then in the end, be like, hey, I think this is what's wrong with the patient. And the reason I think this, why is this. And you will find like this advice works very, very well for almost all situations. Um, which brings me to my last thing. So I think the strongest thing that will make your application strong is not how good you are with using AI. It's not how good your English is. It's about the experiences and stories you have to share and how rich of an applicant you are. And the only way to do that is to see as many patients as you can. Read and write about it. So that's very, very, very important. So every patient, no two patients are the same, no two diseases are the same. um, Treating is the easiest thing. Diagnosing and figuring out what's wrong with the patient is the hardest thing that you will do, and it's the hardest thing in medicine generally. So see as many patients as you can, and then take a few minutes, do like a timeout, and write it about the patients you saw. I always recommend keeping like a small, very journal, or you can just write on your notes application on your phone. But and go do that for all the patients you see, as through all the specialties you go through, you rotate through, and you will find that your application and your personality and the person you want to be will all emerge from that. um, from that kind of gradual process. And if you're somewhere, if you're someone who's done with rotations, is on the other side of house job or is watching this, that's also fine, because you have such an rich experience to kind of go through and browse through in your mind. But I think especially for medical students, like reading, writing, reflecting is so important. And if you don't just talk to your friends, hey, I like ICU because I like how they see very sick patients and how they don't have to rely on anybody. Or you can say, talk, oh, hi, I like rheumatology because I like how elderly people feel after they get injections in their joints, and I like how autoimmune disease works. And talk to your friends like, oh, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? A lot of it will be like, ओ सर्जरी का जो मजा है या उसका जो मजा है या वो but as you can go through clinical rotations, the novelty will wear off, and you will start kind of identifying with what suits you and what kind of person you are, and what kind of life you want to have. And then you will meet people, and I always ask, I to this day, whenever I meet some attending or consultant, I'm always like, oh, what made you choose this specialty? So kind of have those conversations, and that will give you a very good sense of what you're. And um, uh, this process is like a very loosely ill-defined process, but I think this will help you the most. um, what not to do. As I said, many programs you do not need to apply to. You just choose a few, and then how to choose a program is like I didn't go into that because it would depend so much on which specialty you're applying, and what kind of your longer term goals are, and where do you want to be, so stuff like that. Do not buy expensive rotations. A lot of you, I don't know why, every year some IMGs pay like $2,000-3,000 for like a very crappy rotation in the corner of New Jersey in some office, with some random guy, under the guise that that's going to help. You will get a letter out of it, but I don't think you need to do that per se, and I would rather save that money. Um, and do not cut rotations. This is a very, very tricky part of your medical education, where in fourth and fifth year, people who like, some people really crunch down and focus on their steps, and they just don't show up, and there's a lot of drama. But my general advice is do not cut on rotations. I think they are a very rewarding part. I think they're, and this is good experience in Shifa. And whichever medical school you are in, this is a good time. This is your first foray into disease and relation and talking to patients. I don't think you should skip it. And even if you do it with some balance, like you don't need to like completely cut variations. You can go to some and not, and perhaps not attend, take a day off here and there, or try to go home early. But I would say participate as much as you can. I don't think the the risk versus reward is beneficial. The risk is that um, you kind of lose out on what kind of medical, which part of medicine you want to go into, and the reward is that you score well on the exam. But for those of you writing your step one, it's usually a pass fail, and for those of you who are writing step two, um, it actually helps to see patients, because then you know what happens. Like if you see a stroke patient afterwards and you know their protocol and their workup, so we will, a lot of things will come more naturally to you, and you can actually do relevant questions in the relevant rotation you are, and just kind of go through them. So putting everything together, I know I meant to make this more interactive. Like I think everybody was uh, kind of nicely settled behind their laptops. I didn't, but we went over underlying principles of the ERAS application. We talked about some specifics, what there is, when, why, how, um, and then talked about what my personal approaches to this entire process. Um, any questions? Anything at all that didn't make sense? Was this helpful for you guys?
As always. So once again, thank you. We have a couple of questions that people submitted.
Uh-huh.
Mostly it is about CV building, U.S. clinical experiences, as well as letters of rec. So to start off, what does a competitive ERAS CV look like for an IMG, and how is it different from a U.S. applicant's?
Good question. So again, the insufferable answer of internal medicine is it depends. So it depends which specialty you're applying in. So for, and the most like kind of, but if I were to put together common denominators, is that we usually have more clinical experience, whether that's the form of a house job, whether that's the form of you having worked briefly in England. So we usually have a bit more clinical experience, and that is usually, depending on where you are, usually goes in our favor. So program directors can look at it and be like, hey, he worked in internal medicine for 3 months. Oh, hey, he worked in pediatrics, he works in surgery. And so that's usually a competitive IMG. Like having good clinical experience back home is something that helps a lot. I know for a fact my program director who retired, Dr. Benjamin Lloyd, looked very favorably upon that. He did not care much for observerships and electives because he thought, and he's rightly so, a lot of observerships are just shadowing. You're not doing a lot of, at best, maybe you're doing some history taking, asking some questions, but you're just shadowing. Electives, depending on where you do, Mayo Clinic or Cleveland, if you're able to get into those in time, can be pretty hands-on, but at the same time, they're electives. So you see maybe a few patients, but they're of limited. But if you worked at home, and depending on, because a lot of people don't kind of make it their strength. But I think clinical experience at home would be the one thing. Surgical applicants, I've noticed, I see a lot of attendings match. Surgical, by attendings, I mean they are consultants in their home country and then apply for residency here. A lot of surgical programs actually look for that because they need workhorses, and so they just kind of hire those people. So there's that. I think second thing is that you have practiced more in resource limited settings and experience more resources limited settings, and also seen more diverse diseases. So diversity of disease, diversity of infectious disease, because over here medicine is very different. Everybody gets a CT scan. Like that opera meme. Me, everybody gets a CT scan. So everybody gets a CT scan, but that's not very. And that's not you can see you can make so many diagnoses on CT scans, and the imaging is so good. But to kind of just navigate through patients purely clinically at bedside, it's becoming more and more of a lost art. But I think having that sense is something that helps you a lot. And having particularly practice, given, for example, there are some applicants who have passed central lines without ultrasounds, just by landmarks, and that is something that's unbelievable over here. Like, people will not do, like, without an focus or point of care ultrasound, they will never pass a line. But in Shifa, to this day, there are attendings who can pass a central line without using an ultrasound, and do it well with good access and good return. So our procedural skills, and again, that comes under the clinical kind of branch as well. And then if you're, like, depending on, we sometimes have teaching experiences under our belt. That's also something that helps me. My teaching experience helped me a lot, and I worked in another capacity as a teacher as well. So that's not something that US medical students will typically have. They may have done a research year here and there, but for the most part, no. And then it would depend, like, which specialty you are kind of doing and applying in. For FM people, there are a lot of people who have done rural community clinic at very, very busy places. But I think the underlying theme that I'm getting at is, like, our clinical experience is mainly it. And then if you ask me about a particular specialty, then maybe I can give you advice. But I think overarching, that's what the underlying theme would be.
Okay. Another person asked, how early should we start building our ERAS CV, and what should we be adding year by year during medical school?
I would say ERAS CV. So you should have a CV, generally a professional CV, but your particularly ERAS CV maybe a year before you're applying, or in the cycle a few months before you're applying, where you just start putting together everything that you've kind of been through in medical school, high school, whatever you want them to kind of come up with. A lot of medical students I'm seeing that they're making their LinkedIn profile kind of their virtual professional CV. So that's fine. But because you need those three experiences, the most meaningful ones, and you usually apply near the time you're completing your observerships. So I would say 6 months before applying is a good time to kind of start locking into your ERAS applications and knowing what you need to add it, because that is usually the time you do it. If you're applying after, like, you've rotated and then you're applying the next year, then you should start working on it. And as soon as you've essentially decided what your most meaningful experience is going to be.
Okay. And I know you had mentioned there are, certain what not to do's when applying, at ERAS. But are there any common mistakes that makes an IMG CV look weak, in your opinion?
There are a fair few. So I think common mistakes are not researching the programs where they're going. So some people will just apply, and they'll apply to, like, Harvard or Princeton or like something like that. And I think you should. I'm not saying that an IMG can't go there, but I'm saying you also have to be realistic and set realistic goals. I do. So I think apply, punch your weight. I think a lot of IMGs forget to do that, and they signal Brown or Mass Gen or some other things. And for that, you need a particular kind of CV, which you will usually not randomly get at. So even if you're not doing, like, Ivy Leagues, like University of Cincinnati pediatrics is not an achievable thing. It's a bit difficult to get into. Similarly, so I think that's one mistake that IMGs make for sure. So you have to know the program and the kind of applicant they're looking for, and if fit. So you have to research that. You have to do that. That is just doing your due diligence, all right? That's not underselling yourself. That's not overselling yourself. And that also comes into your larger goal of what I talked about, knowing what you want. If you want to be a neurosurgeon in the US, then you have to be willing to put in the work, and you have to understand that you'll be there for a long time. You will likely have to do a postdoc or postgraduate experience. You will have to do some decent graduation work, and you will have to do some lab work. And only then are we thinking about, okay, then you're going to get into neurosurgery. So you have to know what you want. So that's point number one. Point number two, IMGs do not put enough effort into writing their application. Um, uh, Good programs, and there are bad programs. So, but good programs will be interested in who you are as a person. So what you write in your CV is important for them. What cases you put in there, it cannot be like an XYZ systemic review, literature review that you did with a random group of people on WhatsApp and just put it there and then not expect to talk about it. That is something I would much rather you put in a case report or a letter to the editor or something that's very, but something that you know and can talk about comfortably, rather than something that you're just a part of, but you have no idea for it. Because once you do that, that hurts you. If somebody looks at your literature review and asks you, hey, what were the methodologies that you practiced when you were doing this? And you come up with this nonsense garbage answer, which makes it very obvious that you haven't worked on any meaningful literature and research in all your life, that will hurt you. And that will hurt the image of IMGs. So that's something, and I've seen that applicants make that mistake all the time. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but that happens fairly commonly. So then, so again, so be careful about your application. Be careful about what you want to say in your application, and be careful not to put information that you cannot get behind, because you will ask questions about it. The third thing that they do is IMGs that I already went over, they apply to extensively, and that you mentioned as well. Anything else that I can think of? IMGs don't practice their interview. That's another thing. And they don't practice, and it's not about being like very proficient in English. Interestingly, that's not what it is. It's about what you have to say and what your attitude is and what kind of a person you are. So it's not just that you can be very slick with English. It's about how you come across, and you have to understand like interviews are and especially in an age of virtual interviews, it's very difficult. So you have to make I know IMGs who didn't practice looking into the camera. When you're talking, you don't look at your face, you look at directly into the camera, and you maintain that. You kind of don't look at yourself, you don't look at the interviewer, you look at the camera. There is certain so you have that. Those are things that only become evident once you practice interviewing, and people are just like, oh, I'll wing it. But you can't wing it. You have to, because it's not a conversation that we have on a day-to-day basis. We do not interview with people from abroad on a daily basis. Our conversational tones, tenor, everything is different. So to even who has for people who have grown up in the United States or Canada or North America, and generally, even for them in a professional capacity, this will be most likely the first time they're interviewing. So there is nuance, some verbal cues, some expressions that you have to practice, and that only come with practice. So IMGs don't practice interviews enough, and when they do, and when they get feedback, they're not very receptive to it. They need to kind of take that feedback not personally. Okay, oh, I'm not saying, okay, I'm not personally attacking you, I'm giving you good feedback. But that from the people I have coached during interviews, I've noticed that. So these are a couple of things that I think, just off the top of my head, I feel like are common things that IMGs have an issue with, and I think can benefit from improving upon.
All right. Another commonly asked question is regarding U.S. clinical experiences. So, I wanted to ask, what types of U.S. clinical experiences actually count? You had mentioned that, for some people, observerships don't really count as much. But, as a part of this question, what actually does count? Do observerships count, sub-Is, or electives? How much weight do they carry? And another question that someone asked in the chat that kind of ties into this is that, is it bad if you get an elective in a different specialty? than what you would know you'd want to do to instead, decide later on?
So, first part of the question, okay, what are the power types? So any observership from which you can make a reasonable relationship is a useful one. There is no such thing as a bad or a good one. Program directors may look at it and be like, oh, this guy just, he was like shadowing somebody in New Jersey, right? And they know, they can see through that. But on the flip side, if that observership yielded you interviews, if that observership yielded you a connection to a program, that is a good thing. So I think just and there are some observerships which will help you. For example, um, I have some friends who interviewed at Mayo, Cleveland. There was another program, Greenwich program in Connecticut. There's another program in Michigan. So for the most part, observerships don't hurt you. They're just supposed to be a means for you to kind of get a letter, to have a letter, US based letter, and possibly make connections. For example, places where I rotated, I was able to, like, there was this gentleman who was a primary care physician who didn't take any students. I just kind of shadowed him like unofficially. But at the end of the week, he was like, "Hey, I know this guy in Chicago," and then that yielded me an interview. So I got a letter from him as well. But the purpose of that was that, oh, I got an interview. And then sometimes it's also kind of helps open up ways for other applicants. So, for example, wherever I went, I sent my wife went the next year, and then I also asked a couple of my friends to go because I was able to make a relationship with them. So sometimes sometimes it's just a ways of getting a visa. Like sometimes you just need that observership to get that stamp of a visa. Um, and go there. And every observership is what you make of it. So again, if you're able to, because that whoever that attending is, XYZ endocrinologist, family practitioner, whatever, um, you go there, and in this case I would have to emphasize, like, the predatory ones I would avoid. There are a lot of predatory ones who are charging a lot of money, but people you can shadow with just out of cold emailing or stuff like that. And then again, working very hard with them, which is showing up early, studying on your topics, taking initiative. Hey, I'll do that. Don't wait for them to assign you a reading. Just assign. uh, Making that relationship. They probably trained in residency somewhere as well, and they probably have some friend who is working as faculty at some place, because all of us that graduate go someplace. And if you're able to kind of work with them, they will advocate for you. So I think the utility of rotations isn't what, if it's a sub-I or if it's an elective or that. No matter the nature, for an international medical graduate, it's going to be a means of entering a medical sphere and getting like a referral or a recommendation. And that small checkbox of having a US based letter over here, and perhaps that paperwork you need for a visa. So that's my take on like observerships and electives. For the second part is like, is it bad to rotate? No, it's not. And it again, the larger question is, what do you want to do? So I rotated in neurology as well, because the second time I was applying, I was like, I don't mind neurology. I can do neurology. It's just that I just need to kind of start working. And so I asked myself, what specialties do I enjoy? So in Pakistan, like before I chose to kind of formally enter adult medicine, I was very, very interested in pediatrics. But the nature and scope of pediatrics is a bit different in the US. I worked extensively in the pediatric ICU as a house officer and the pediatric floors. Um, so I had all this like pediatric experience, but now then I eventually transitioned into it. So I put that in as well, and I just kind of framed it as about how I've seen. Uh, I kind of used that pediatric ICU experience to talk about how I've seen acute medicine. So it's all about how you frame what you have. And then I actually also had OBGYN experience. I did 3 months as a house officer, and I worked with Dr. Farzana, who is excellent, and she let me do a lot of things in her clinic and see a lot of patients. And I spent some treacherous time in the labor room as well. But I use that experience as well, because as someone in internal medicine, you're managing like pregnant patients all the time, and so and you see a lot of like hematological stuff that you see. So I framed that and included that in my application actually, rather than exclude it. I did rotations in neurology, I did rotations in pediatrics in the US as well, and I included those letters, and I talked about the diversity of disease I saw. I talked specifically about the cases I saw. So when I was in neurology, there was a particular case that I saw, which was actually an autoimmune encephalitis. So I spent that as an internal medicine thing. So you can, there is so much you can do with it. So, but no, any application is better than no, any experience is better than no experience. Any experience can be pivoted to go into something bigger. If you go into some very small clinic that you found out through some XYZ or somebody messaged you, you go there, you make a bond with them. You can find yourself, you can be like, hey, I'm going to apply internal medicine and pediatrics. Do you know somebody in pediatrics or XYZ or internal medicine or family medicine, and make your way through that. And I've actually done that personally. So that's how I would say. So no, my answer would be no. Would a surgical experience hurt a medical app? No, because you can just frame the surgical experience as how you as procedural, as kind of comfort with procedures in internal medicine, because there are parts of internal medicine that are procedural, and then vice versa. So it's all about how you frame and write. In that case, my strategy would be to take particular cases. And so even though you can be right, oh, I rotated in surgery, but you're actually applying for internal medicine, so you can be right, I saw cases of pediatric obese patients with complex metabolic disease and complex diabetes, and I saw how they were managed on the side. So that's like an internal medicine thing that you saw, and actually you saw in a capacity that most internal medicine people won't. So that becomes a strength, and provided you can talk about it and you can get about it. So it goes back to seeing patients. But yeah.
Okay, and I'll take one more final question. Saad, I believe you
You can
had a
take
question.
as many questions as you are my day off. It's fine. I can talk to you. Yeah. Oh, I just saw. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. So,
Saad, you had a question. You had raised your hand.
Yes. Assalamualaikum Rashid. Assalamualaikum sir. Sir, very nice talking to you. Um, I had a question about the previous conversation that we were having about interviews. So a lot of us have given interviews from schools to organizations to societies and Shifa. How different is the tone of the interview that we go into? Because um, there is a certain degree of us being whimsical in our interviews over here, and there's with professionalism, but there's a certain degree of comfort you can have over here. How different is the tone, and to how senior of a person are you talking when you give that interview? Who takes the interview, if that makes sense?
yeah, solid questions. So as far as who you interview with, you can be interviewing with the chair, program director, and a chief resident. That is how, or maybe a senior resident. So chair is the highest person there is. It's even above head of the department. It's kind of like the head of department, but chair is of a division. So I've interviewed with chairs, I've interviewed with program directors, I've interviewed with faculty who are assistant professors, associate professors, and but regarding the tone, that will depend from the interview to interview. The insufferable, it depends, come again, because you have like some will be very stern uncles, like very stern people, and they will not appreciate like joke making or anything. They'll be very professional. Some people will be so relaxed. Some people will be chief residents and they'll be like grave serious with you. Some people will be chairs and they will laugh with you. For the most part, majority, it has a very lax tone. American interviews are generally very laid back. They can get very intense. The program where I interviewed, my interviewer was Anthony Donato. Um, he did a very intense interview, but like for the most part, no. Like I've talked about I don't know about anything about baseball, but I know a lot about movies. So I've talked about Superman in my interviews. I've talked about baking brownies in my interviews. I've talked about how I met my wife in interviews. I've talked about my favorite memories from medical school. But then I've also talked about how I dealt with grief and the death of my grandfather. So they've been very intimate conversations. They've been very happy conversations. They've been general kind of forgettable conversations. So between all of that, so you get a mixture of, but for the most part, I guess, I think you can get away with being whimsical, optimistic, as long as you come across as sincere. It's a very hard kind of balance to strike. But that's in my personal experience. I've been through the entire spectrum, and I've been through some very stern people who just do not like whatever you do or smile at them. They just like, so they're
Also
just like,
about the interview, to be candid, there's this approach that a lot of people tell us when going into an interview that you want to
Mhm.
portray yourself as you're pro America, you love America, you want to be there, and um, that's the type of person you should project yourself to be. I often मैं अक्सर कमरे में बैठा होता हूँ, पढ़ रहा होता हूँ या मैं वॉक कर रहा होता हूँ, मेरे दिमाग में आता है कि नहीं मैं सच बोलूंगा, मैं ऐसा ही हूँ और मैं वहां जाके यही सच्ची सच्ची बातें बोलूंगा. तो how do you see that? Do you think that has any value?
uh, so like as a rule, like my, like if you're making like political like things, I don't
Not
go into anything but
yeah,
not political in your interview.
just one.
Yeah, but and I know that's not what you meant, but like generally, like that's not the hill you want to die on. And the second thing is, no, I think that's would be another thing I see in IMGs, that IMGs love to sell their country short.
Mm,
um, and we are not a representative. I think the average Shifa student will not exactly represent an underprivileged person of the community, and I think it's unfair to try to portray that, and I think they can see through that as well. I think you don't have to love or have a very pro patriotic or I love America kind of thing. I don't think you need to do that. I think you just need to be very sincere about medicine and how it's you want to train here, and how it is. That's it is. Like for some people, some people do frame it like that. They're like, oh, I wanted to go to New York all my life. Like that's also fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like my like the way I phrased it was like my parents, I listen in my car, like I listened up. My dad, I didn't even know what West Virginia was, and my dad used to listen to John Denver. Country roads take me home, and like my mom used to love to listen to Bruce Springsteen. And we would also listen to Habib Ali, and we would also listen to Nusrat Ali Khan. We'd also listen to Michael Jackson. But like my thing was like, so there is the pop culture and just film, and then that is something that I do. It's not what I wanted to come to America, but it doesn't hurt that it's like there's this familiarity to it. So that's how I framed it. But I would personally, I don't. I talk about how enriching my experiences were in my home country, and what I can bring to as a residency program as an applicant. So that's like I am a rich amalgamation of all the experiences and of all the patients I've had the privilege of seeing as a medical student at home, of the excellent medical training that Shifa has given me, and I think I can train here. So something like that.
thank you, sir. So one last, very basic question. Um,
Mhm.
does it matter if the LORs that I get, even if I let's say I get them in my fourth year, if they're from different rotations compared to the one that I want, compared to the specialty that I want to apply to?
No, just ask the whoever's writing the letter to tell them to write. Like for example, if you rotated in surgery, and you had an excellent time and you have a good relationship, but you want to apply in internal medicine, so tell the letter writer, sir, please write it in a please write it in a way that um, uh, that that makes it clear that I'm applying as an internal medicine. And sometimes they will say, hey, why don't you write the letter and I'll upload it on your behalf, which is fine. Dr. Tahir does that all the time. So what you can do is like you can just write it. So but that would be and that goes into another thing. But that letter, again, good letter writers know how to write it. Some people are very lazy with their letter writing, so you should need to get a sense of them. Like if they're great for them, but you feel like they won't get the time to write me a letter, you can offer, hey sir, I can write this, you can just upload it, okay? Or hey, so you can do that as well. But no, it doesn't hurt.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Very nice talking to you.
Of course.
Okay, so I'll ask a couple more questions. Someone asked in the chat, In which portion of your application did you include your experiences in pediatric ICU and OBGYN? Did you list them as separate experiences or talk about them under one experience like your house job?
So I did I think my house job internal medicine experience separately, and then I listed that separately. So I think it wasn't one of my most meaningful experiences, but it was one of the experiences, like the fourth or fifth experiences. That's what I remember. Yeah.
Okay. And someone else also asked, they wanted your opinion on when it would be the best time to apply for electives or observerships, given the fact that the visa process and the fact that step one usually needs to be completed first. So, would you recommend trying for them in fourth year, or is the time in fifth year typically enough? And what amount of clinical experiences would you consider sufficient or a safe target? Is there a certain number of rotations or months of USCEs that you would recommend aiming for?
It's a good question. So the number that's kind of out there is 3 months, and then the upper limit of that is like anything beyond 6 months doesn't help. Again, the quality of the rotations and what you get out of them, which is so variable. You could be rotating at Baylor and Scott, and it could be a garbage rotation, and you could be rotating in the corner of Cleveland in an XYZ place, and it could be because if you get a good letter and if you get good connections out of it. So, but I would say, I think 2 to 3 months you need, because you just need to kind of take at least 2 weeks to connect with like a person who you're working with. I think you should work at least 2 weeks with an attending or a consultant or in a practice where you can just kind of make an impression. I think 2 weeks is a good amount of time per rotation. So if you end up doing like 3 or 4 of them, so that comes up to like 2 months or 1.5 months. And I would think like don't over 3 months, I don't think there's much utility. Over 3 months, I would try to think about, get your exams out of the way and perhaps prioritize giving step 3 if you can, and use that time to give step 3. And then with the second question, that's kind of a tricky question. So my B1, B2 visa was rejected 3 times before I got it. So I got through medical school, I got through house job, I got married, and I still wouldn't have my visa. And I had applied multiple times. And I kept getting rejected, even though I had very good reasons and had very good letters from good places. First 2 letters I think I had from Houston Methodist, and then I was a medical student. So but it didn't kind of work it out. In the larger scheme of things, it worked out very, very well for me because some things happened that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So visa is just like a treacherous thing. But for most part, most of you will not have much issues with it. I would say start visa is early is better, especially given that there's such a lag between visa appointments and visa approval. So I would say, like, step 1, step 2, everything aside, start rolling that ball pretty soon, like towards the end of second or third year. Look into dates and everything. Apply for get those dates in and try to kind of then score a letter. If you don't have a letter, maybe try to make like if you have a relative, maybe make a visit, because it's a visit visa regardless. And if you are applying as for the basis of an observership, so if you happen to have step 1 and step 2 done, then step 3 is usually a very strong reason to get that visa approved. Another way to do is, like, you can publish some. It's not very difficult to get stuff in AHA chest. People get some basic case reports into that all the time. The way to do that is to reach out to your alumni who are in residency programs, and because we typically get a CME fund, so we don't have to pay $150. That's what the program pays. So I can apply to AHA and have you listed as a co-author and go and present it, and you guys will get it. And you guys can also kind of apply on the visa and say, like, hey, I want to present this paper. So that's another route. But for the most part, I would say sooner. To answer your answer would be sooner. Apply as soon as you can. Second, third year, try and get a date. You likely be a year out. Step one, having it before or after, I think it definitely is a bit of an advantage having it before, but it's also not a deal breaker. Just because you've given step one doesn't mean you'll be guaranteed a visa. The way it helps is that if you give step one, then you open up, and if you give one of the English proficiency exams, Mayo and Cleveland open up for you. And then I think there's a Florida campus as well, which also takes observers, and they also take money, like $400-$500. But that's something I think you can consider doing if because those are good rotations. You that's also where, like, people who can apply for that typically get visas issued. But unfortunately, there's no exact science to it. Once you go there, you have to kind of really demonstrate that, hey, मैं जाके फरार नहीं हो जाऊंगा इस मुल्क में. So you have to show, okay, I'm going to come back. And that's usually just, you have to show some assets, proof of residence and stuff like that. So there is so much to it, but I would say early, it's not the end of the world if you don't get your visa. If you don't get it, start going, enroll into house job, start studying for step 3, apply again for the step 3. So the one thing I would say is, like, there's no end to it, but yeah, early is better.
Okay, and I think that's about it. That's all the time we have. Thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure to hear from you, and very, very grateful to get your input and your advice. We all very much appreciate it. Just thank you once again, sir.
Of course. Prayers for all of you guys. Duas for all of you. Good luck with everything. Don't be strangers. Message me for anything I can help you with. Good luck.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the attendees who came here. And that's about it. Thank you very much once again.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.